Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Welcome back to another Sunday morning in Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad you joined us again this Sunday morning. Like last week, this week we're going to be talking about the issue of teen suicide and maybe today some of those causes and what we can again do about it. We decided to do a two-part conversation on this because we really think it's important enough that we want our community talking about it, because our kids, whether we like it or not, our kids are a little bit at risk for so many things. And this is just one of the things that could come to haunt some of them. And we want our kids to be supported. We want our kids to be in conversation with us. So today we're going to continue our conversation about teen suicide. We hope that you stick around to hear from our experts this morning. We're going to take a break for a quick Mercy Minute, and then we're going to be back to talk a little bit about what we might be able to do to help keep our kids connected and away from bad choices.
The different bariatric surgical options here at Mercy Joplin includes laparoscopic room-wide gastric bypass, laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy, and laparoscopic lap band placement. In addition, we also offer revisional laparoscopic surgeries for those patients that have had previous bariatric procedures but have had failures. The surgical procedure of choice will vary with different individuals, and so that's why our team will work with the patient on an individual basis to determine which procedure is the best fit for them. All three of the bariatric procedures that we offer here at Mercy Joplin have a long track record of proven safety and efficacy. The best procedure for the individual has to be a decision to be decided between the patient and the physician.
Well, thanks again for joining us for Faith in Our Hometown for another week. We are talking again this morning about teen suicide. My guests this morning are Jen Black, who's the Executive Director of the Alliance of Southwest Missouri. Jen was with us last week, and so thanks for coming and being here again this week, Jen. And we also have with us this morning Dr. Renee White, who is the Associate Professor and the Department Chair of Social Work at Missouri Southern. Okay, so one of my colleagues out there. So it is good to have you both with us this morning and to continue our conversation about this important issue of how do we do some prevention. So first of all, let's say a little bit about yourselves, because Renee, this is the first time you've been on the show, so our viewers want to know a little bit about you.
Well, thank you, Father. Thank you for having me. I am the professor out at Missouri Southern, a new program, social work department, but I have been in Joplin 35 years as a mental health professional, a social worker in a variety of nonprofits. My most recent job prior to the Missouri Southern stint is I actually worked with the Joplin School District post-tornado in a variety of settings of helping stabilize children with their trauma responses from the tornado, as well as just restabilizing family life in the Joplin community after the tornado.
I wish someone would restabilize me, but that's a whole different conversation for a different day. So Jen, you want to reintroduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. Jen Black, the Executive Director of the Alliance of Southwest Missouri, and we do a lot of prevention work specifically with children and trying to strengthen families in our community as a whole.
Well, thank you both for being here. So, why do we have a phenomenon like teen suicide? Why do we have a phenomenon like suicide at all? What is that all about? And because sometimes in order to talk about it, we got to kind of get behind it, because that sounds kind of crazy talk to folks who don't contemplate it. So why would somebody even contemplate it? What is that all about? Talk a little bit about that so our viewers can kind of get behind it a little bit.
Well, I think at the core of all of our being, our two biggest desires is to be known and to be wanted. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us, we have been blessed with people that know us and want us, but there are a lot of people that are on this earth that they don't feel that way. And so I would imagine that's a very, very lonely, dark feeling, mm-hmm. and I'm sure they feel like they can only do that for so long.
Yeah.
and it's a way out.
Even recently, I found it an interesting phenomenon. Of course, they've taken a lot of grief for it, internationally, but even in Great Britain, they have appointed a minister to address the issue of loneliness in the life of people, and it's just like, well, why is the government doing that? Again, maybe it isn't the government's work, but if somebody doesn't bring it to the forefront, somebody doesn't bring it to the conversation. I don't know that I want a cabinet position for that here in the U.S., but I do think that somebody has to ask the question, in that way, so that we can figure out how to take care of each other.
Yeah, I think that is excellent what Jen said, and I think the other, the precursors to suicide are vast and multiple and complex, but true, the core of our being, that wanting to be known, wanting to be heard, wanting to have a purpose. And the other thing is just what we're finding in the literature around suicide is a great deal of undiagnosed mental illness. So when you have people who maybe are in that place of loneliness and you add to it an undiagnosed mental illness and then maybe a small setback that seems insurmountable, you really almost have a recipe for what appears to be a hopeless situation. I think one of the things I'd like to convey to our listeners today in the audience is that one of the greatest things that I think we've lost in just our fast-paced world is story. We just have forgotten to tell story of who I was as a child, who my parents were as children, and kids these days, teenagers, they don't know that all of us have failed. And that when they see me as their mother or as a professional, they may have an image that I've always been put together and that my path has been straight, which is the furthest thing from the truth. And so I think one of the things that we can do over and over again is to let teenagers and pre-teenagers and small children know that life is a journey full of ups and downs, full of road bumps, full of missed opportunities, full of regrets, but we have places to put all that in context and keep moving forward.
Right.
And I think that helps when that formula of hopelessness impacts a child. Just as Dr. Eggleston said last week, that it's such an impulsive act to take your life, is so impulsive.
Especially for teenagers.
Yes, but it makes perfect sense if they don't believe there's any future out there.
Yeah,
and
that they'll never recover from this.
Yes, and
whatever the embarrassment or the shame or the question or whatever those existential questions that they're going through, because that is who they are. Yeah. I mean, they're figuring it out, and every once in a while they get stuck along the way and panic.
Yes.
They panic. It's just like, oh my God, my life is over. If anybody finds out about this, if anybody, does this, and so it's just like, and I've got plenty of failure stories to share, but I share them with our teenagers, from time to time, because I want them to understand that we all messed it up.
Absolutely.
We all messed it up along the way.
And even conveying as parents, grandparents, adults who care about youth, is to also say, no matter what you tell me, we'll get through it.
Oh yeah.
No matter what you tell me, the judgment is not the first thing that we'll talk about. We need to have that open conversation so that youth will come to a safe person to talk. Yeah. One of the things we've learned is that youth are primarily going to talk to other youth. And so that's another thing we need to do in our community, is inoculate the entire community with enough education, whether you're a 12-year-old listening to your friend or you're a 48-year-old listening to your 12-year-old or whoever, that you can hear when somebody's in trouble and know what to do next.
And reach out to somebody, yeah.
Yes, a lot of people have heard that they're kind of concerned about someone, but they want to minimize it because it's scary. And so what we really need to do is just have a conversation, just like what we have a conversation about cigarette smoking and other things. We need to talk about mental illness, and if somebody is hurting, what's your plan to help that person?
Yeah, and again, we get so nervous about the issue of mental illness, or that those things have happened. I mean, people get shocked when I will say, oh, suicide and depression run in my family. And that, and they're just like, oh my God, you'll talk about that? I'm just like, well, yeah, I want to talk about it because I want to normalize it. I want everybody to understand that everybody's family's got some of this. Mm-hmm. This is not, or studying, I would always just say, if every family is a little dysfunctional, then what's so dysfunctional about being dysfunctional? I just don't understand it. I mean, we're all there. Every single family has got issues. Every single one of us has issues. And until we get to that point where we're not trying to look so perfect or so holy or so better than everybody else, when we realize if we could scrape some of that off the surface, we would find out that we're all kind of a little bit more alike, and that we're all kind of hurting a little bit, and we've all messed something up. And and again, if we can keep people from panicking about it and get them to talk about it, we're going to be a lot better off, within that context.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think, we've talked even last week about social media and how that has disconnected the human contact. And I think, again, helping youth see us as we were once them. We have been. And of course, generationally, it's all different issues. But we've all been in that place of uncertainty. We've all been in that place of wishing we wouldn't have done what we did last night or whatever it was, and that we can walk through that. And it may not be with grace and with humility, but it doesn't have to end our life.
Now, see, I'm all about grace and humility. All right, but I'm not good at doing it all the time, but I'm all about it, okay? Because again, that whole thing when you were saying earlier, I'm going to use the churchy language, okay? Sure. And that's that whole business about, I want all of my teenagers that I work with, that I know, I want them all to know that I'm going to love them no matter what, no matter what mistakes they've made. There's really only one that I can't help them through, and that's if they take their own life. Right. I can't undo that for them. I can help shield them other ways. I can help walk alongside of them. I can, help prop them up. I can do whatever I need to do, but I can't help them through that permanent solution to whatever their issues or temporary problems were. I can't do that if they do something like that. And I've always worn mine too. I mean, it's just like, so, they sometimes look at me like I'm sounding really callous, but I really do mean it. If any of mine really do go and do something stupid, I will not make heroes out of them. I will call them stupid, even at their own funerals, because I'm really sorry. I mean, I'll love on them and I'll love on their families, but I'm not going to make a hero out of them when they did something goofy, when they had so many other choices. Right.
Well, and in the literature, we talk about the suicide contagion, which means if we elevate somebody to hero status or sainthood status, that we will see in that community potentially rapid episodes of suicide because of that contagion. Right. That this is the place where I'm finally somebody cares about me, even if it's a 15 minutes of fame by having a funeral. And so we have to really be careful not to elevate the person, but to really look at it as what were the problems. And if it is mental illness that's undiagnosed, to really make that the message for the other kids is let's get the help before we get to this point.
Oh, definitely. Because there is all kinds of help out there. There are possibilities. There's all kinds of help out there. Again, before we take the break, maybe we might talk a little bit about the hotlines and about the texting line again, just to make sure everybody's got the information. So you want to talk a little bit about our local and our national hotline?
Sure.
Okay. Jen, go for it.
There's a national hotline, and that number is 1-800-273-8255.
One more time.
1-800-273-8255.
Okay.
And then locally at the Ozark Center, there's a local line, 417-347-7720. Apologize for that.
That's
and
okay.
then a toll-free line, 1-800-247-0661.
And I hope those numbers, those should be up on your screen. We should be good to go there. That's if you're going to make telephone calls. We've also got this wonderful 21st century phenomenon of texting. Okay, so real quick, that should be up on the screen there. And again, that's about any issue. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we come back, but we are going to take a quick break. This is Faith in Our Hometown, so don't go away.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
So again, thanks for sticking with us for another Sunday morning on Faith in Our Hometown. And again, we were just talking about the hotlines, all right? So we had those phone numbers. And then there's also the texting line. And again, this is not just for suicide, but anything that people are kind of dealing with, emotional issues, anything they want to ask about, even anonymously. So they can text. And what was that thing that they can text to again?
The text line is 720-7TXTOZK. Again, that is anonymous. They can talk about anything, and there will be someone that will respond and text with them.
Yeah.
I have found that helpful. Sorry, Father Jay.
That's okay.
That's really helpful for an adolescent who is worried about their friend. Anytime an adolescent even says, I'm not even sure why my friend doesn't come to my house anymore. I wonder if they're using drugs. I wonder if I've hurt their feelings. This texting system is valuable for, really the whole community to get a variety of information, and really it's in your control. You can stop texting when you've got your answer. You can initiate a longer conversation. So it's a really fabulous service really for adults as well as teenagers to get information. I know when I worked in the school system, we did a lot of training on the text about it, and things about sexual reproduction and sexual orientation and things that you don't want to ask somebody else because they may really judge you. You can ask enough questions that you could maybe possibly form in yourself your own opinion.
Again, because our teenagers, really, they're just trying to figure it all out, the same way that we had to try to figure it all out, and to varying degrees of success, I might add, okay? But that's their job. It's their primary developmental task at that point in time. It's just starting to figure out how they piece it all together, and to be able to have that opportunity to ask some of those questions is good. But remember, moms and dads, grandmas, grandpas, all of you out there can ask those questions too. And that's available to you too if you're in the world of texting, okay? That'll work as well. And there's also, again, if there are other concerns, and those concerns are immediate too, there's always, a 911, emergency rooms, those kinds of things. If sometimes you may not have the luxury of calling in or doing those things, but there are other service venues, in the community, besides the hotlines and everything too.
Absolutely, and Ozark Center, who operates the hotline here locally, their office is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you don't have a phone, you can certainly go to 30th and McClelland. They do have a button at night, ring the doorbell, and somebody is there 24 hours a day to speak to them, as well
That's
as...
wonderful.
Yes.
I didn't even know that was available after all this time. See, you learn something new every day.
It's called Access Crisis Intervention, so ACI, as well as any emergency room. And if you do call 911, oftentimes the police or law enforcement may come to your home, but they can have a mobile mental health evaluation happen in your home or at the location. Oftentimes people who are distraught may not want to get in a car. It may not be safe for you as the loved one to get them in a car.
Sure.
So certainly evaluate all the options, the phone call, the emergency room, 911, the building, Ozark Center ACI building, and then again, they have a mobile crisis unit that can actually come to the person if it's not safe for the person to leave.
Yeah. Now let's talk for a second, because I think this is kind of fascinating, because it's like we've got a lot of these resources. We know that people could use them, but let's talk about the reason why sometimes our teenagers don't want to talk about them. Because they're afraid that if they do start talking about some of these things, or their fears, or those kind of things, that we're going to lock them up. That we're just going to whisk them away, and we're going to put them in the hospital, and we'll never to be heard from or seen again. And we know that's not the case, but that's what they're afraid of.
Absolutely.
So how do we get past that? How do we get past those kind of automatic, fearful, protective defenses, and make sure that we're making the right contacts? How do we do that?
I think it's a level of relationship and trust, and it's key for adults and peers to be pursuing friendship and relationship. And I think even as adults, if a teen comes to us and tell us, it's just reassuring. You don't want to promise that that's not going to happen, because they need to go and be assessed to see if that's what needs to happen. But I'm going to go with you, and we're going to walk through this together. And you're right, probably 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be institutionalized or put in the hospital. And it's just reassuring them that it's probably not going to happen. Let's go and just find out what's going on and get help.
Yeah.
And I think, in the mental health world, we have to find more interventions. We really do, as well as we have a multitude of interventions, but most people either hear the most extreme, which is institutionalization, and of course teenagers. If somebody's gone from school for 7 days, everybody's asking what gives, and everybody goes, oh, they got locked up, you know, they either went to juvie, they went to psychiatric hospital, something happened.
The grapevine usually is fast and accurate,
At
least to some degree.
Yes, but we typically don't talk about the intermediate interventions. Oh, they're on a suicide safety plan with their parents, they are checking in with their counselor every third day. We don't, the grapevine doesn't care about that.
Yep.
So oftentimes
It's only the drama.
Thank you.
It's only
Father
the
Jay.
drama that the grapevine really cares about.
So what we have are youth who have a perception of, you say this and A plus B always equals C. And what we really need to have is people to understand there are a multitude of interventions. And then really in the mental health field, we need to keep finding more interventions. We really do. We know kids and youth are best served in their locality. The proximity of family, social networks is really, really important. It doesn't benefit us to move kiddos out of their community if we can serve them here. So examples are, you know, currently we have pediatricians that are learning and being trained on how to ask questions that will direct diagnoses into mental health situations. We're trying to get more pediatric psychiatrists in town. So really localizing the services so that fear of being institutionalized is really the last resort when we can't assure any other way to do safety for children.
Yeah. And again, I think that we've got all kinds of things at our disposal, but again, I think the real onus is on us as the caring adults, is to make sure that our kids talk to us regularly, so that all the mini crises don't become a major crisis.
Yes.
You know, because it was hard growing up. I mean, you know, I had a hard time. I'm 57, you know, but I had a hard time growing up. I mean, you know, and I'm in my day and age, I wasn't faced with nearly all the pressures that they're faced with today. And when I look at some of the stuff that they have to contend with, I'm like, you poor things. I mean, like, you know, I didn't have to judge all that and figure out what I was doing.
Correct.
It's tough.
Some of the literature that's out there is having that primary adult relationship continue. And so some of the analogies that I like to talk about is, as parents, we probably read to our children before they learned to read. And that was a nightly ritual. And then maybe we had some rituals around kids in the back of the minivan as we're driving all over the place for their soccer games or whatever it was, but we had dialogue. And suddenly, about middle school to high school, those dialogues change, and now even more so than when we were young, Father Jay. But that whole idea of how do we continue that dialogue and inserting ourselves and not just waiting for a problem to happen,
right,
but to talk and dialogue ongoing. And so there's a great, Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services has a great card stock that they will give to any family, and it's called Connect With Me. And it's 106 questions that are prompts that you talk around the dining room table. I guess you could still do it in the minivan if you wanted, but it's these questions to have conversation with your adolescent and pre-adolescent. So I really encourage families to not stop that conversation.
Where would they get that card?
You can just go to the website, Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, and then just on the drop-down search engine put Connect With Me cards, and it's free of charge. They physically come in a box to your home, and there are 10 different categories. One category is mental health and mental illness, but there's a variety of other categories: hygiene, coping skills, decision making, vocational thoughts, all sorts of neat categories, just that parents need to keep dialoguing.
You know, and again, sometimes when you begin to do something like this, it can seem a little artificial at first.
Yeah.
But once you've practiced it a few times, once you've been through a few questions, or even, you know, I can just hear the howls of protest. I can't talk this morning. The howls of protest, you know, just saying, oh my God, another one of the questions. But even with youth groups or those kinds of things, those things can be very helpful in terms of just saying, yes, we're going to do it because it's important that we talk about some of these things, and so we're going to sort of draw one, and we're just going to suffer through it. Okay?
Absolutely.
And I mean, you know, it's just like, so your turn, share.
And have
they
the
love it
adult-
when I do that.
And the adults share as
The
well.
adults have to share too. Yeah, and we get into that whole thing, but we really do have to figure out how to coach each other into those situations. Okay, so real quick, we got a couple minutes left before we're going to have to take another break. But if you were to say, what is the single most thing that we can do here in our area to help our teens not contemplate suicide, but to contemplate talking through their issues first, what would we do?
I think it takes a community, and so every aspect. It needs to be happening at school, it needs to be happening at church, it needs to be happening in the home, and just realizing that the community needs to come around this topic and really invest in our teens. I think sharing our own struggles as well and being very real with teens is key, because we all struggle as well. It's not an isolated issue to teen demographic.
Yeah.
And just encouraging them and supporting them and offering them hope at every turn.
Renee, 30 seconds.
I would say, and when we realize it's a more severe issue than just generalized hopelessness, if we see that there's maybe a mental illness occurring, that we know professional help, that everybody in our community needs to know how to get that professional help, whether it's for themselves, for their loved ones, or for their neighbor. We must know help is available.
Sure, and again, I would just say for a lot of our teenagers, we're not always talking about mental illness. We're just talking about growing pains.
Yeah.
You know, the ups and the downs of life. It just gets to be difficult for us because it is a tricky thing. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Stick with us. We'll be here to wrap up, and don't go away.
The SANE program, or Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program, is a program established to provide a coordinated, specialized care to patients who, or women or men, who've been the victim of sexual assault.
The SANE program is really designed to be a collaborative community response to sexual assault.
It's really important to make sure that it's not just the report or the forensic, but they get all of the testing that might be needed for their health.
It's also important to know that you don't need to know if you want to press charges or not. We don't get law enforcement involved unless you request it.
I just want to express to the victim that it is never your fault. You always have the right to say no, and that it's your body. So if you say yes one time, it doesn't mean every time.
I think it's important that sexual assault victims remember they've been victims of a crime, and crime victims do not pay for those services.
So thanks again for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. Again, our second weekend talking about teen suicide and how to help our youth. Maybe not always the most pleasant conversation for a Sunday morning, but an essential one, I think, if we're just really going to continue to make sure that our youth know that they're cared about and that we're willing to talk to them, that we're going to love them no matter what, and to do all those things. My guests this morning have been Jen Black, who's the Executive Director of the Alliance of Southwest Missouri, and Dr. Renee White, who is the Department Chair of the Social Work Department over at Missouri Southern. So I thank them for being with us and sharing their expertise. We just really hope that you'll join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown. But the important thing between here and there is, again, how we love on and care about and communicate with each other as we roll into the future. Our youth need us. Our youth need us to listen. And our job is to do that as people who care. So look for us next week here on Faith in Our Hometown. God bless. Have a great Sunday.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.